Good morning and welcome to A Glimpse of the Feminine. I'm your host, Tracy. And I don't know why I said my name that way, but here we are. uh, I my brain's not working this morning and I'm recording. That's lovely. Oh, what a week. The weather has turned chilly and rainy once again. So we had like a week of this gorgeous spring weather, and it was just a tease. So we're back to wearing sweatshirts and having the fire on and all that kind of stuff. Last week, I did something different and fun. There are several local Renaissance fairs, and one of them was auditioning for people to participate as characters within the fair to interact with people who are coming. And so I auditioned, and hopefully within the next week or so, we'll be hearing back from them if I actually will be doing that. That won't be till fall, but I just thought, oh, that'll be really fun. So we'll see. Last week, we talked about loving people well and how the church can do that corporately and not just us as individuals. And so this week and next, I want to take some time to talk about the ways churches can love different populations well. And I'm going to focus in on domestic violence and families and individuals with special needs. And today we're going to talk about the ways churches can support women in domestic violence situations. Now, I'm pulling information from a couple different websites, which I'm going to put in the show notes. But for the most part, I'm just using their information as kind of the framework for my own observations and other things that I've researched. And so I'm not going to directly reference them here in the episode like I would if I was quoting from them. But I will be adding several resources, including them, in the show notes. The resources will be both for churches and domestic violence survivors. I am going to cover some statistics today. I'm going to talk about just the things that I personally know from observing and interacting with women who have survived domestic violence. And I have not. I'm not a survivor. As a woman, as a small child, there was domestic violence in my home. And so I do have the experience of a child within that environment, but not as the wife and mom. So although I'm going to share some of that type of information, my focus today is really what can the church do? Because quite honestly, the church fails these women all the time. And this is quite literally life and death. So the church needs to get it right. So, a little bit about domestic violence. 1 in 3 women, let me say it again, 1 in 3 women, and 1 in 4 men in the U.S. have experienced rape, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime. Which means you are either a survivor or you know someone who is. Domestic violence survivors are people who have been traumatized and isolated. They've been worn down, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally as well. They're used to walking on eggshells and living in fear. And abusers will often gaslight their victims, which makes it even more important that we don't. It seems obvious, but it's not. So don't gaslight these people, please. On average, it takes a woman 7 times before she leaves her abuser for good. Now, there are many reasons for this, but fear is a big one. Many women are subjected to psychological aggression as well as the physical. And that's the use of verbal and nonverbal communication with the intent to harm a partner mentally or emotionally, or to exert control over a partner. So many women are subjected to this during the relationship and even after they manage to leave. So keep in mind that things may not go the way that you envision them. This is not an easy thing to step into and help somebody with. It is complicated, it's messy, and there are many, many layers. So the survivor needs support and not judgment throughout the process. One of the reasons I chose to talk about this is because I have some friends who not only have been abused by their husbands, but I've watched them be secondarily abused, or even primarily. I hate calling it secondary because it's just a different kind. So it's really a primary abuse as well. But I've watched it happen from the church to these women. And it needs to stop. The church should be there to help, to take care of, to rescue, if you will. Domestic violence is rarely just physical, right? And I think we all know that without having to be told, but just in case. There's often mental, financial, spiritual, and emotional abuse as well. Abusers will often control the finances so that the woman is reliant on them and does not have the ability financially to leave. A lot of times they don't like them to work for the financial reasons, but also because abusers like to isolate their victim, to keep her away from anybody that might be supportive and be able to help her. If there are children and my brain just stopped on me. The likelihood is not the word I want. Once pregnancy and children come into the picture, the likelihood, again, that's really not the word I want, but my brain's just not grasping it, for domestic violence increases. So it's not that it doesn't happen when there are no children in the picture, but it's often pregnancy's kind of a trigger for it to start if it hasn't already. If there are children, they may be being physically abused as well. Or there's a threat of having them taken away from the mother that hangs over her if she should try to leave. Children of domestic violence abusers are 2.5 times more likely to be physically abused and 9.5 more times likely to be psychologically abused. And I think, I didn't see it, but I think part of that high number is that if the children witness it, that is abusive. To see their mother being abused, and again, there are no easy answers, because in the situation is hard, and to get out of the situation is hard. And nobody comes out unscathed or without scars. Children of abusers are also more likely to experience neglect, and they're at a higher risk to either be a perpetrator or a victim later in life. That's not a given. However, we live what we know. That's not obviously 100%. We can choose differently. We can get counseling, we can get healing, and we can turn away from that. But they're more likely. We live what we know, so we know abuse, right? If we've grown up with it. And if we think that that is what love looks like, we're much more likely to tolerate it. But all the blame sits on the shoulders of the abuser. Let me say that again. All the blame sits on the shoulders of the abuser, not the abused. There is nothing that justifies the abuse, period. No matter what he says. And I'm going to say he when I'm talking about the abuser, partially because this is a podcast mostly geared towards women, but also statistically, the likelihood of the abuser being a woman is less than it being a man. So I'm not ignoring the fact that women can be abusers and men can be abused, but the occurrence of that is less than. This is a multi-layered issue, which I think I've already said, but it bears repeating. Partly because I think a lot of times church leadership and just humans in general want black and white. We want simple, give me an ABC answer. Here's a pill, here's a formula. This is the way we can take care of it and move on. And not just this, but let's face it, almost nothing in life is that simple. I don't know where we ever got that idea, but I don't think I've ever experienced anything in my life that was that simple. It just doesn't happen that way. But these situations are messy and they're multi-layered. And if you're going to step into it with somebody, make the commitment to be there for the long haul. Because if you give the impression that you are going to be there for the long haul, and then you dip as soon as it gets inconvenient or uncomfortable for you, you've done so much more damage to that woman and her children than if you hadn't helped at all. Like, either be in it or stay out. Because when we begin to step into something like this with somebody, when we give the impression that we will be there and we will support them, and then we dip, that creates a sense of uncertainty and doubt and maybe I'm not right, and am I even worth helping? And all these things go through the woman's mind, and she's already in survival mode. And you are doing damage if that's what you're doing. So just don't. I have watched friends and acquaintances get hurt repeatedly by well-intentioned people who can't just even check in on them after telling them that they would be supportive and be helpful. And then they become persona non grata. And that is so damaging. So just don't. It's actually not that hard to be a decent human being. And let me say this. You can be supportive of somebody. Like I get it. This is it's a scary thing to step into. And we may not know how to help. But you can be supportive and love that person without having to do any of the rest of it. Just let them know, hey, you know what? I'm going to check in on you and I will pray for you, and text me. If you need to talk, text. Maybe you don't get it. I don't get it. I don't understand what it's like to be in your position, but I will listen and I will pray for you. And if I say something stupid, just tell me and I'll do better. Like, these are supportive, helpful things. Just knowing she's not alone in her circumstance is huge. Huge. So we can educate ourselves, and we can be the hands and feet of Jesus for survivors and their kids. We can do that on various levels, but don't give the impression you're going to be there on a deeper level than you will be. That's all. If you know you cannot stick it out long term in any way more than praying and checking in on them, that's fine. But just be honest about that. If you can't even do that long term, then don't commit to it. How about I am so sorry you're going through what you're going through. Can I pray for you right now? And pray for her right now, and don't commit to any more than that. Like, that's okay. It's when we give the impression that we're going to do more than we will. So here are some ways. And maybe a church can't do all of them. And that's okay. Churches are different sizes. They have different giftings within the congregation. Like, a church doesn't have to do all of it. But there are things that can be done. And it may be on a case-by-case basis. Like, depending on the situation, a woman might need more help than another. So, see what I'm saying? Every situation is unique, and it needs to be taken on a case-by-case basis. But there are some of them are pretty simple and really pretty, I don't want to say easy, but they're not as complicated as some of the others or as involved. So, how can the church help domestic abuse survivors? Now, while there are some cases of false reporting, it's important for the church to believe a survivor when they reveal they've been a victim of domestic abuse, because the vast majority are telling the truth. Survivors live in fear. So if they have the courage to talk to an elder or someone else in the church, letting them know what's happening and asking for help or support, it's extremely important that we take it seriously. Listening without judgment, being empathetic, and validating feelings and their experience is important. Don't. Let me say it again. Do not say things like, but he's such a nice guy. I can't believe he'd ever do that. I've never had any problems with him. Okay, for one thing, you're not living with him. And abusers are chameleons. They tend to be very personable, charismatic, he's a great guy to get along with kind of people. Abusers are chameleons. So do not gaslight the survivor. support them in establishing safety. So this one gets a little more tricky. Excuse me. Because supporting them in safety means we have to listen to them. Here's the other problem I have seen domestic abuse survivors run into. Everybody else thinks they know what's best. Everybody else wants to make the decisions. They want to dictate what does safety look like. But when someone has been or is in an abusive relationship, we cannot tell them what is best. They need our support of their autonomy. They know their abuser better than anyone and what is going to be safest for them. May not look like what we think it should. We should not push them toward a specific plan. She may know that if she stays put and just works quietly kind of behind the scenes to get a plan set in place, she's going to be safer than if she just leaves. Or if she confronts him, because that may escalate things. Now, I looked this statistic up several different places to make sure that it was accurate. The reality for domestic abuse survivors is that, hear me now, 75% of domestic violence related homicides, 75%, occur upon separation from the partner. And that increased risk remains about the same for at least 2 years. Hear me again, 75% of domestic violence related homicides occur upon separation. And that increased risk remains for at least 2 years. We need to understand that what looks safe to us is very likely going to put the survivor at even greater risk, and her children. Stop and think about how often we hear in the news about a murder-suicide. And quite often, not always, but quite often the children are taken out too. And if they're not, they're left orphans. So when we realize that what looks safe to us is likely putting the survivor at even greater risk, then we can understand that we can't make that decision for her. But she still needs our support. She may need housing. Now, most often, getting the survivor and her children to a place the perpetrator doesn't know, it seems ideal to us. And sometimes it's extremely necessary. But also, let's recognize that kind of disruption is not a great solution. It may mean their safety. It may mean their well-being. But that doesn't mean it's a great solution. She's got all these things she's thinking about, all these layers of, I want to be safe. I want my kids to be safe, but I also want my kids to have their friend group and have their support system around them and to be in their own school. And they're already been traumatized so much by the situation they're living in. And mom just wants to be able to give them stability and some continuity. And so just removing may not be a great solution. It may be the only solution, but it may not be a great solution. So recognize that. And there may be many things that keep her from wanting to leave the home. Now, sometimes, especially if they really, really care about appearances, the abuser will agree to leave the home. Like, oh yeah, we can, of course we'll separate. Of course. If that's the case, then the church needs to step in and hold him accountable to staying away from the property. Because even if he's not coming into the home, if he's on the property, that is causing a tremendous amount of stress and anxiety for the wife and children. So if the church will just hold him accountable, don't be going over there. That would be super helpful. Helping her nervous system to begin to heal by just doing these smaller things of holding him accountable and keeping him away from her, that goes a long way to beginning to heal the nervous system. Churches can offer referrals. So churches, in my opinion, should be like a resource warehouse, right? Churches should have resources for just about anything. That doesn't mean they have to be the resource, but does the church know where to point people to when they need help? So referrals. Refer to a local domestic violence support agency that they often will provide legal aid and support groups. Now there is a national DV hotline, and I will have that in the show notes. But most areas have local support agencies that can offer help. Many of them have emergency housing and legal help as well as counseling, and some offer more. Our local support agency in this area not only has safe housing, but they also have some space for animals. Because quite often, if the safety of the animals is also in danger, or the animals are needed for financial stability, women don't want to leave. And this agency does not want that to be the reason that someone might stay in a dangerous situation. Now, if we aren't in that situation, we might think that's ridiculous. Why would you stay for a dog? Why would you stay for the cats? Why wouldn't you leave the goats? Well, if it's providing money for her, it's important that she has the animal. And let's not disregard how important our pets are in our lives. I am not a pets are people too kind of person, but they are a part of our family. And especially, and I'm not discounting the importance for the adult, but if there are kids involved, pets can be extremely important emotional regulation for our children. And so, of course, mom is going to want to make sure that the kids have what they need to be as stable as possible. And quite often, if the family leaves, the animal will bear the brunt of the abuse. So it's a legitimate, it is a legitimate concern. So our local agency also provides business cards that have nothing but their phone number on it. So that should a woman have it and it falls out of her purse or falls out of her pocket or whatever, and her abuser sees it, there's nothing to tell him what that is. This is something that the church could do. If your local domestic violence support agency doesn't do that, the church could. The church could put that number on business cards and just have them available. The church could have domestic abuse posters in their restrooms. Now, depending on the size of your church, you may not have men's and women's bathrooms. They might just be both genders, but you could still have that information in the restrooms. You could still have, up on the wall, a pocket on the wall where these cards are available, or there's some sort like have things like important numbers available in places where a woman can get a hold of it unnoticed. Don't have them out in the foyer because she's not going to be able to grab it if her abuser's standing right next to her. Resources. A church may be able to support a survivor and her children by providing resources. So let's talk about some of those resources. Money. Number one, big one. Often the abuser is the primary wage earner. She might be working, but she's probably not earning enough to support them. There is often financial abuse happening in a domestic violence situation, and the survivor may not have any money of her own or not enough to be able to support herself and her children. So, helping her financially could mean the ability to leave rather than stay. And I realize not all churches would have this ability, but some do. And again, I'm not suggesting that a church has to do all these things. You may not be able to, but there's probably one or two, and you can always support emotionally, spiritually. Like there is things everybody can do. Schooling. This may be a resource. A church may not have the ability to help her get more schooling if that's needed, but maybe there's somebody in the church that could sit down and help her with all the application stuff to get into school. The church could have resources to help her pay for it. Like the church may actually be able to, but if they don't, then they may be able to, again, be a source for resources. So when I went back to school, the state Department of Labor actually had a program that I didn't know about until I was about halfway through, but I was still able to take advantage of it. The state had a program where they would, depending on if you were going into like healthcare, and I'm not sure all of that, but I think more of that type of like service type industries, the state would pay for your schooling. And they would also help you with resume and job search and all that kind of stuff once you were out of school. Idaho has a program where they'll provide up to $8,000 in grants towards education. So if a church knows about these kind of things, they don't have to have the money themselves, but they have the ability to point a person towards the appropriate resources. See what I'm saying? Childcare. Maybe she's been working and has had childcare, but childcare is expensive. And if she's leaving and she either has a job that probably isn't paying enough to provide, or she's needing to get a job, the likelihood of her being able to get work that is going to pay for childcare and support them in this economy, not real high. So maybe the church could help with childcare. Don't let childcare be the reason she can't leave. Food and clothing. If they have left in a rush to be safe, they may not have been able to take very many clothes with them or other things. Did the kid get their favorite stuffy? Like these are important things to think about. So the church could take them shopping to get some clothes. Maybe they need some groceries until she gets her first paycheck, or second harvest rolls around, or food stamps can be taken care of. Like how can we help in a emergency situation? What can we have available? Safe shelter. So a lot of domestic violence agencies can help with emergency housing, but longer term, if she's had to leave her home, maybe the church could provide a security deposit and like first month's rent or something. Again, depending on the size of your church, depending on the dynamics, you may not be able to do something like that. But what a blessing. I can't even imagine how overwhelming it is to be looking for a rental and have to come up with a security deposit, first and last month's rent. Like that can be thousands and thousands of dollars to get into a home. And if you're leaving a domestic violence situation and maybe just getting a job, that's unattainable. So maybe the church could step in and help. Maybe the church can help with medical. Now, I'm talking about both mental and physical. And I just looked at the time. I'm going to apologize right now. I'm running longer today. But this is important. This is so important. This has affected people I love. And we need to do better. We need to do better. So, survivors of domestic violence can have a lot of medical issues going on. I think it's important that we recognize that domestic violence is not just being hit. And so, my focus today has been more along that line, but abusers can abuse in a lot of ways. And you don't have to be hit for your physical well-being to be affected. Living under stress long-term causes physical issues. We know that. So survivors of domestic violence can have a lot of medical issues going on. They might have heart problems. Their muscles and bones can be affected. They might have digestive issues. There might be reproductive issues. Nervous system is definitely like her adrenals might be completely shot. Let's just be honest. So helping her to get in to see a provider and have a thorough physical is important. For one thing, she may not realize that she's got some issues going on, depending on what it is. So this is important. She needs to be as healthy as possible for herself and her kids. Survivors also suffer from depression and anxiety, as well as PTSD and CPSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress. That happens, the complex happens in relationships where you are continually traumatized. Churches will often pay for counseling, but a lot of times it's that pay is connected to approved counselors. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the person was talking about their church paying for their counseling, but they would only pay for the counseling with the counselor that attended the church. Let's stop that right now. Because for one thing, they may not be trauma informed. And to send a domestic abuse survivor to a counselor who is not trauma informed or who has no understanding of domestic violence is only going to do more damage. And truly, if the church cares about a person's mental and emotional well-being, they should be more concerned about that person seeing a counselor or a therapist who is equipped to help them than whether they're a Christian or whether they're tied to the church in some way. And personally, I have seen life coaches who were far more trauma informed and exponentially more helpful to people who have lived through trauma get healthy than licensed therapists. Because licensed therapists may not have any idea about trauma. I've also seen licensed therapists be some of the most unempathetic people, misunderstanding what's being said to them, and further traumatizing the person they're supposed to be helping. Counselors and therapists who are not trauma informed or even empathetic cause more damage than they help. So the last thing, and it is certainly not the least important, is legal help. This may be as simple as helping or supporting her as she obtains a protection order. And let's keep in mind that a protection order is important because it creates a paper trail. If there's a protection order on file, in theory, law enforcement's going to be a little quicker to respond. And, you know, if you live in a rural area, a quick response might be a half an hour or more. That's just reality. But protection orders don't really protect anybody. Their value is they create a paper trail. And some abusers, it seems a little counterintuitive, but some of them are really like they're rule followers. They abuse because that can be done in secret. But the protection order might be enough to at least check them a little bit. But some abusers, a protection order will just escalate things. And this is just the reality. They do not protect anyone, but they create a paper trail, which legally is helpful. So let's be supportive in getting that piece of paper. Or if they need to go to court, recognize how stressful and scary these things are and support them. Can I go with you? Let me just be there for you. We can go out to coffee afterwards. Let me be there. And maybe, depending on the church, they could actually pay a retainer for an attorney. Do you have any idea how expensive it is to get a divorce? Especially if there may be a battle over who gets the kids. Many abusers are extremely vindictive. So if she steps towards divorce, they are going to pull out all the stops and they are going to be nasty. They're going to hide resources. They are going to go after the kids. They are going to go after her. It gets ugly and it gets expensive. And churches want people to reconcile. We want this marriage reconciled. We want to save this marriage. Well, let's think about the people in the marriage before we worry about the marriage. The church needs to stop idolizing marriage. And that seems like a very godly goal. But the reality is, statistically speaking, abusers are not very likely to reform. It can happen, but it doesn't very often. And to think that this may be the one is pie in the sky thinking. It may be the one, but statistically speaking, it's not. So let's be realistic. And let's be honest, a divorce isn't what kills the marriage any more than a death certificate kills a person. It's just the legal paper that says this is dead. So let's do what's right. Again, abusers are not very likely to reform, which is why there is an ongoing conversation in this country about having a domestic violence registry, much like we do with sex offenders. so that women are aware. This is a dangerous person. Every part of this situation is likely overwhelming for the survivor. She's been in survival mode for who knows how long. And when you live in survival mode, if you've been there, you'll get this. When you live in survival mode, even simple little decisions like, what are we going to have for dinner, can be paralyzing. And so she may come to you and she may say, I'm being abused. My husband's tried to kill me. And you want, boy, we're going to move forward. We are going to get you out of there. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. What do you want to do? Let me support you, blah, blah, blah. And it has taken her everything she's got to come to you and speak truth and let you know what's going on. And now she's exhausted. And now she can't do anything. This is likely a long process. Again, it will be messy. It will not be simple. It's going to be multi-layered. Don't step into it unless you're going to be there for her. She may not move or get things done in the time frame that you think it should happen. There might be a step forward and 2 steps back. She needs support. She needs encouragement because her nervous system is shot. And she's traumatized. And she needs to be encouraged. She needs to be reminded that she is worth the effort. That it's okay. Take a step and then rest. It's okay. You know, when you're thinking about what you need to get done, that is forward motion. Even if you can't get it done right this minute, it's forward motion. It'll happen, and I'm going to be here to support you. Don't continue to abuse these women when they're trying to get away from abuse. Next week, we're going to talk about how churches can welcome and accommodate families and individuals with special needs in ways that matter. I just think this is important. You know, we talk about things, you know, pastors, you know, we got to forgive. But they never talk about what that actually looks like. And so I don't want to just throw out the church should be doing this and we should do this and whatever, and never sit down and talk about practical ways that can happen. So today, next week, that's what we're going to do. Please remember, like, share, comment. I would love your comments. Is what I'm doing, is it hitting home? Am I way off base? What do you think? And subscribe, especially if you're on YouTube. Really, I like I said, I don't understand the algorithm thing at all. But apparently, just subscribing really helps the algorithm. So please subscribe to my channel. I am so thankful for each one of you that listens and that takes time out of your week to come and sit with me and and hear me out. And I am way over time this week. I apologize. This is not going to be like the norm, but I felt like these things were important. So, yeah. Thank you for hanging in there with me. And until next time, take care.